Okay, so let's call to order at 7:03. Don, are you amenable to taking minutes? Great, thank you so much. And you can tell me if this is not the right protocol. I wanted to add 2 discussion items to the agenda. No action to be taken. Do I do that after public comment or before? After public comment. Yes, okay. So other than the folks that have been regularly attending, I don't see anybody here who would be joining us that doesn't normally join, but I'll still ask if anyone has anything.
Krista, you have to do it first. Sorry, I was trying to get unmuted. You have to do it before any part of
before anything. Okay. Okay. So in thinking about our charge as a community engagement committee and helping to get the word out about things going on in our school district, as well as gathering input into decisions that need to be made in the future, you know, we focused a lot on the long-term facilities plan, but recognizing that there were lots of other points of interest for folks to be able to weigh in on what's happening in our schools. And given where we are now with the pandemic and the significant financial challenges that that's bringing up, you know, some of which were there already, it seems really like a good idea for this group to continue to be thinking actively about how we can both give people a heads up about, you know, all the great work that's happening, but also some of these challenges, and be thinking about how we want to ensure we're continuing to get that community input. So the 2 things that I was hoping we could add after Patrick provides a brief update on how things are going, and also after we hear an update on some of the community projects that we initiated, I wanted to add a discussion about a possible town hall meeting for the end of the school year, which I'll share a little bit about at that point in the agenda. And then another idea about seeing if this group might be interested in exploring the idea of finding a way to collaborate with and possibly bring together school officials as well as town officials, you know, recognizing that, you know, again, coming out of the community engagement meetings, there was a lot of energy around public-private partnerships on connections, strengthening connections in the community, schools as community centers. And now more than ever, with all of the challenges we're facing from the pandemic, it seems like the issues that we as a school district have to grapple with really have a lot of commonality to the issues that a lot of our other community organizations and town leaders are facing. So I'd like to add those 2 things as discussion points if folks are amenable, and no action to be taken, but just to kind of throw those ideas out as additional places for us to think about where we might want to put some energy. So again, that would be after the update from Patrick and on our community projects. So I will, Don, do I need to get approval from the board committee members to do that? Or since it's a discussion, we can just have that? Okay,
no,
great.
As the chair, you have the authority to do that.
Okay, great. Okay, so then I'll move to public comment. And I don't think I see any hands waving, so we'll just go right to approving the minutes from our last meeting. Don, thanks again for being willing to take the minutes. And if I could get a board member to move to accept those, that would be great.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And I just need a second, please.
Rob will second.
Okay, great. That's good because it's just you guys that can do that. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the minutes from April 14th, please say aye or put up a thumb. Great. And we'll consider them approved. Okay, so Patrick, if you wouldn't mind if I turned it over to you to give a brief update on how things are going in our schools, and then on the financial piece of things, primarily, district-wide, but also from what we're hearing from the state as of today.
Sure. So as far as the schools go, our three primary areas of focus for the past several weeks has really been around obviously the continuation of learning, and that's going relatively well. And I think it impacts different students in different ways. For some students, this is a wonderful opportunity, and for others, this is a tremendous challenge, and there are plenty of students that are somewhere in between. I think it's going relatively well for most, though. I think we've been finding more and more creative ways to support students that are struggling and are getting better at connecting with families that have been a little trickier to get in touch with throughout this. So I feel like that's continuing to get a little bit better as time goes on. I do think it's also wearing on people a bit. It's wearing on families, and it's wearing on students, and it's wearing on educators. So that's absolutely a real thing as well. And unfortunately, we just have to find a way to kind of power through it to the end of the school year. In terms of childcare, our childcare program has grown a fair bit since we last talked. We are now up to serving 35 students in our essential persons childcare, and we have 12 students on the wait list. And it's considerably larger than the next largest in the state. So it's I would argue, successful childcare program running in the state right now. And they're doing amazing things. In fact, our ELP director, who's also running the childcare, was on with Vermont After School or something like that, an organization where she was helping to train others in safety protocols, et cetera, and all the factors that need to be considered in putting together the childcare program that we have. So really has become sort of the model in the state for how to do it, which is great. And we're working right now to talk with Addison Northwest and Addison Central about some cost sharing, because we have some of their students. And we want to make sure that we're getting the most of the CARES Act money that would be coming to MAUSD, and not getting money that, not tying up some of those CARES Act funds in costs that would be associated with students that are not in MAUSD. And so that's where we're trying to partner with our other Addison County school districts to help share in that. And so those conversations are ongoing right now. But I have no reason to believe that we won't figure something out that really works for everyone. So just again, a great opportunity to collaborate across districts in Addison County and just be good neighbors in these challenging times. So a lot of good things happening there. And food service continues to run really strong. There was a great article in The Independent recently. And yeah, we're feeding a lot of families and continuing on. And really with all of these, we're starting to think more about what does this look like toward the end of the year. First of all, trying to gain clarity on when is the end of the year. As it stands right now, the expectation is that school districts follow their school calendar. So for us, the last scheduled day with students currently is June 17th. There is, because our student days now in this year's calendar exceed 175, which is the minimum that we are required to have by state statute. We do have some flexibility perhaps in what we do with that last day, which is June 17th. That could be a day for staff only and not students. So we're going to begin those conversations as an administrative team to talk about the pros and cons of that. And should we decide that that's a better day for staff professional development instead of student contact, then we need to engage in conversation with the union, because the contract says 176 student days and 10 in-service days. And so we'd be changing that a little bit. I don't think it'd be a big deal. I think the union would actually appreciate the opportunity for that last day to be for professional development. So I don't anticipate any hiccups with that, but nothing definitive. So as it stands currently, June 17th is the last day. And so with some clarity on the end of the year, we're starting to shift gears and think about what does summer look like. So what might the expanded learning program be able to look like this summer? What do we do for food service this summer? Do we try to find a way to continue deliveries, or do we do pickup only as we typically would do in the summer? Trying to figure that out. And then really the summer is going to be significant in trying to prepare for what next fall might look like in terms of an academic aspect. So, and there's tons and tons and tons of uncertainty right now in terms of what the fall looks like. The one thing that seems really clear is it won't look like school as we've come to know it, right? So it's not going to be all students showing up every day, all the time. There are likely to be social distancing expectations in place that we wouldn't be able to meet with all of our students in the schools at once. So exactly what that looks like is really uncertain. And we're still waiting on some clarity out of the AOE on what is expected so that we can begin working on that. Kind of backing up a little bit to the end of the year, we do have a little bit more clarity in terms of graduations and ceremonial kinds of things. So the guidance right now is that groups shouldn't be larger than 10, but that you can have those groups meeting and doing some sort of celebration. Obviously pretty limited on what you can do with groups not exceeding 10, but building leaders are working with in particular students and teachers to think about some creative ways to adhere to those guidelines, but still make the end of either their 6th grade time or the end of their high school time really something special. So there are plans that are in the works right now. So from a sort of school side of things and what's happening, that's sort of a quick overview. Any questions on that before we jump into some of the financials? Yeah, Nancy?
I heard you talking about the ELP summer program, and I'm just wondering, does that mean that decisions haven't been made yet about whether the ELP camps are going to happen?
I think we're confident that they're going to happen. We're less certain of exactly what they're going to look like. Right now, we're feeling as though they're going to look a lot like what the essential person's childcare looks like in terms of the numbers of students, like the ratios to students and adults and the amount of space that any group of students might occupy. So, 6 or 7 students with 2 adults is the current thinking. And again, as some of the guidance changes on that, the group sizes, there's some talk that the group size is going to take a jump up from 10 to maybe 25 in the not too distant future.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously opens up some possibilities. Doesn't mean we have to go to 25, and that'll be something we take into consideration. Like what do we think families and staffers will feel are appropriate group sizes? 25 may be too big a jump right away for folks to really feel comfortable with. So we'll kind of gauge that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Patrick, Darla had a question in the chat. Darla, do you want to unmute and ask? Hi, Darla.
Hi, sorry, just jumped in from another meeting. Patrick, I read recently that the Mary Johnson program will not be allowed or whatever, invited or available to use school facilities. And I'd just like to understand that decision, and so many families depend on that program. And I'm wondering how you came to that point.
Yeah, so it kind of evolves around our 21C grant, which we were just awarded. So it's a little less than $500,000 grant that we get to fund our after school programming. And part of that grant process, this winter, I guess, is when that process was underway. We have to identify our partners. And if we're partnering with someone who's not identified, we run the risk of jeopardizing the grant. And so this winter, Mandy and Katrina were working to reach out to partners and kind of get our list of partners together for the grant application. And the reapplication happens every 5 years. So we were due for this, what I think is going to be our 3rd installment of this 5-year grant. And so reached out to Mary Johnson to talk with them about being an official partner, in particular at Robinson and at Bristol. and they were not interested in being listed as a partner within the 21C grant. So that put us in a position of having to say, if you're not on this list of partners, we aren't able to jeopardize this grant, and therefore we wouldn't be able to continue with you beyond this summer. And they understood that, and so that's where that landed. So obviously the summer is very much up in the air. We had made arrangements for the Basque program at Bristol to continue this summer. I'm not sure if that's really going to happen or not in light of COVID-19. But beyond that, our ELP program will be expanding to cover the services that the Mary Johnson program has historically covered in Bristol and at Robinson. ELP already had expanded to cover the childcare needs at the other 3 elementary schools. So this just sort of expands that to cover all 5 schools now. So that's the gist of how that came to be.
Thanks.
It looks like Sarah had her hand up.
Yeah, I'm curious if the state or the district is going to offer some professional development on virtual pedagogy throughout the summer, and I guess not the remainder of the school year, just to set our teachers up to be better prepared for the fall. And even if we go back to school, then the potential that we might have to go to virtual learning again.
Yeah, so those are things that we're talking about right now. There isn't any definitive plans, but there's a recognition that we need to think about what PD is necessary, and as we start to get a little bit more clarity about what the fall might look like, that may offer us the clarity we need to really structure what the PD needs to be. There's been some ongoing PD around that virtual instruction. But it's been really most of our in-house folks offering that PD. So we may need to think about if we need something in addition to that. And the summer might be a time that we could provide that. But first we need to know more about what the fall expectations are going to be so we can do that kind of planning.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yep, sorry. So is there any reason that you couldn't do the professional development in June before the 17th, like let students go? Because I'm sure it is pretty wearing. We're hearing that all the time. We're past the honeymoon phase, if there ever was one with the pandemic. Yeah. So is that a possibility? I know they contractually have to be there, the teachers have to be there, but can students be released earlier and then have professional development then? Can't do that.
State statute requires a minimum of 175 student contact days. And we had a couple of days where there were no students back in March when this really first began. Those days have been waived, and those are the only days that have been waived. So we still have to hit our 175, and for us, we hit 175 on June 16th.
And that's a state mandate?
State statute.
Okay. Thanks.
Patrick, I had a question. Some of the schools in our area are dealing with the, quote, grading process differently. Some of the districts in our area are dealing with the grading process differently. And was there any opportunity for all the superintendents to try to get on the same page? It's tricky when we have kids at CVU who word on the street is that their expectations are different from kids at Mount Abe and different from kids at Middlebury. So I just wondered, since our scale is so small and we can do some things on a statewide level more easily, was there any effort to try to make that similar across the board?
There was definitely conversation with our regional group of superintendents. The part of the trick is we didn't all have the same scale to begin with. So it meant different kinds of change to be able to get to the same place. From our perspective, when we were looking at it, we already had a 4-point scale so what I think some other districts, and this may be the most common thing, some districts have gone to a 3-point scale for scoring. We were already using a 4-point scale at the elementary level and at the secondary level. So for us to do the work to shift from a 4-point scale to a 3-point scale would have been fairly significant, and it would have been sort of a retraining for students And the difference between a 4-point scale that everyone was already accustomed to and our systems were built around and a 3-point scale didn't seem worth the headache it would have been to make that change and sort of retrain everybody around a 3-point scale. So we decided to stay with a 4-point scale. But there was conversation about what makes sense regionally, and we sort of landed on there was some consistency around the 3 points, but there was also recognition that we were in very different places to begin with, so we likely weren't going to get great uniformity in that throughout the region.
I don't think I see any other questions right now. Do you want to give a brief financial prospectus as well, Patrick?
Sure. So nothing really significantly changing here. There was I think when we last talked, it was projected to be an $89 million shortfall. There was some sort of a calculation error that's actually more like a $69 million shortfall. What that doesn't address is sort of replenishing the coffers in terms of the emergency funds effectively that are expected to be in place that we drained and then some. So that $69 million is the shortfall after we've drained those emergency funds from the state fund, the ed fund. When we look at that 69 million and then we look at all the other figures and funds that need to be replenished, the reality, and if you look at this state ed fund update, you'll see the reality is, I think when this all comes out in the wash, the expectation is that we're going to be somewhere in the $150 million impact from COVID-19. There's still a lot of talk. I haven't heard anything definitive yet about how the state plans to address that $150 million shortfall. One idea that seems to be something that a lot of people are in favor of is the state borrowing money to take care of that deficit and then repay that over time, so that it kind of softens the blow in any one year and spreads that out over time. But there's no clarity yet that that's exactly what's going to happen. And I don't remember what we discussed before, but we've been doing a lot of work to position ourselves to be able to withstand whatever the financial impact is, in particular in FY21. And some of the ways we're doing that are, as we have been in the last couple of years, taking advantage of attrition. So as people leave positions for various reasons, really being strategic and intentional about whether or not we fill all positions that become vacated. So we do have a handful of positions already for next year that we're budgeted for that we do not plan to fill. So that's going to free up some funds that we could use to sort of submit to the state in whatever way that happens. Either we send money to the state or we get less money from the state. I'm not exactly clear how that's going to happen yet, but we're positioning ourselves to be able to do that with those unfilled positions. But in addition to that, so we had some unfilled positions this year as well. So trying to utilize FY20 dollars to take care of some. In particular, I'm thinking about the big project at Mount Abe that was sort of already underway and committed to prior to COVID-19, paying for as much of that out of FY20 dollars as possible to also free up FY21 budgeted dollars to help cover any costs that we need to cover for the state to make up the deficit in the ed fund. So I'm feeling pretty good and pretty confident about FY21 in terms of our ability to withstand the financial impact that we're going to be seeing because of the combination of those things that we're doing. FY22 is a very different picture. FY22 is very concerning to me, and I think that's part of our conversation today because there's going to continue to be COVID-19 related financial shortcomings to address, on top of all the other financial shortcomings that we've been anticipating for some time with declining enrollment and increasing costs. So that's the gist of the financial picture.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I don't know if I understand how we got from 69 million shortfall after draining the rainy day fund to 150 million. But even if I don't understand that, it looks like on the national news that there's going to be a shootout in Washington over, whether significant funds are going to be allocated to the states, and even whether what's already been allocated, whether states will have some flexibility. So, I mean, one of the things that just, as you talk, Patrick, it just makes me feel for you is there's so many things that aren't clear yet, and yet you're having to plan for them. It must be maddening. I hope you found great ways to cope with that, because it's crazy making. But my point about this is that lots could change in the picture as far as what the states get, and then what our state decides to do with. I mean, there's going to be a shootout already in Montpelier about how the state's going to use more funds than it's ever gotten in the past already from the federal government. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts.
You brought up a good point, Nancy, and I didn't think to bring that up, but there is some speculation about what's going to come from the federal level in terms of funding to help overcome this deficit, because again, Vermont's not unique in that it has a deficit. It may be unique in the extent of the deficit because unlike most states, Vermont has 1/3 of its ed fund comes from consumable taxes. I think we're the only state that has that anywhere near that level of revenue that comes from that source. So we may be feeling it perhaps in a different way than other states. The reality is every source of revenue is taking a hit in COVID-19. So maybe that all comes out in the wash. But I think there's also precedent for some sort of a federal aid package, right? Was it the 2008 recession when something like that came to school districts to try and help overcome some of those financial challenges? So that's an option as well. But as you said, it's all talk right now. It's hard to know what's actually going to materialize.
Well, and I think what we most need to help our congressmen think about, I'm sure they're working in this regard anyway, is to make sure that our state has flexibility instead of the feds telling states how they can and cannot use the money, because they don't know at the federal level what each state needs.
And it's unlikely that there's a one-size-fits-all that works.
Right. Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts about that rosy financial picture for Patrick before we move on? Okay, thank you, Patrick, for continuing to keep us informed. And maybe we can just take a minute to share an update on some of the community projects that got started out of this group, and then talk more in depth about how these kinds of conversations that we're having here are important to share out with the larger community, and finding roles for people in the community to help be part of solutions moving forward. So Sal, would you like to share a little update from the postcard zone, and Rob as well, maybe?
Sure. I have only handed out about 35 postcards so far to people, and a number of those were in handfuls. So it could be that some kids are talking to lots of elders, but a lot of kids haven't, or families haven't shown interest in, or I haven't figured out how to ask more than a few times on Front Porch Forum and connecting with friends. So I think it's going well, but I haven't really checked back with those parents and kids to see how it's going. I think that would be interesting too. I know one person has been doing a back and forth, but that's about all I know. I did meet someone on the street, an older woman who said she definitely wanted to be a part of it. So I put her name on a few, but I haven't found any kids yet to hand that out. So I ended up writing her one just to let her know that she really is on the list. and it'll happen sometime. And the other thing is, as far as the interviews, I finally did my interview, and it was so pleasurable to do that. And I loved hearing about the stories, and it was just I'm so grateful that Nancy suggested we do that. That's all for me.
Yeah, the postcard project up here in Lincoln. I mean, success, minimal. My daughter has written a lot of postcards. We've had the little red box down at the general store. I think probably 20 to 25, just without having to prompt, people that I know in Lincoln have been taken. That's a rough count. I know a handful of friends who have children, and basically all under the age of 4. So 3 and 2-year-olds have sent postcards, but have gotten them back from community members in Lincoln. And I think that's been really neat for them. Yeah, you know, it's been worth every minute that I feel that we have put in Lincoln for the effort. And the little red box is still there. There's still postcards in it. And I was hoping to maybe get some traction with the mentor program at LCS. Didn't have any luck there. And I understand the bandwidth and other priorities. So, you know, just a hopeful resource for students and or educators to engage in either literacy projects and also community connectivity. And, you know, take it or leave it, I think is a worthwhile effort. So continuing to stock the red box and put weekly prompts on, and I think I'm neighbors with the librarian here in Lincoln, so it's going to migrate down the East River Road, or West River, I guess at that point, coming up and have a new home at the library. And I think we'll extend beyond just the idea of students connecting with the community, but more of just Lincoln connecting with Lincoln.
Go ahead, Dawn.
There's a senior meal that's happening. I think maybe in Bristol I heard something about it. I wonder if you could leave a stack of postcards there, because they're doing a pickup for meals. They're not sitting down, but they're doing takeout, I heard. I'd have to ask. I could get more details tomorrow, but I did hear the Masonic Temple's doing it, maybe?
We have we're doing it here in New Haven as well, and we have more seniors than we have kids, which is part of the problem. So it's more about getting the kids to write the cards. And we had said if we got 20 cards out, if we made a difference in the lives of 20 seniors and kids in town, it would be successful. And we've given out 27, and several of the kids have gotten responses. Andrew, I don't know if your kids have gotten a response from the cards they sent out, but it's my daughter. I went out to a couple of college kids at our home, and they were really excited to write postcards to local folks. So even though we didn't get as many of the younger kids involved as I would have liked, it was nice that the college kids who grew up here and went to school here and feel that this is their community are connecting with people they've never met. And my daughter got a postcard back, so she's got somebody she's communicating back and forth with now. So I think it shouldn't just be a one and done thing. I think it's the kind of thing that we just keep working on, and maybe once things get back to normal, whatever that looks like, then the teachers will have a little more opportunity to maybe work with their kids and have this be something that the school would be interested in taking on, because it's a little hard to access the school kids if you're not in the school. But yeah, we found the college kids sort of filled in a nice way, and that might be something, Sally, in Bristol, you might find there's quite a few college kids around.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was just going to jump in because, I think one thing it's really connects totally with what Kim is saying. I think the college students are also finishing up right now. I think, they've been pretty busy themselves, but, I don't know how much, effort we do want to put into this, but I could really see that is something, an area that we could potentially put more effort into. And, I could even talk to my daughter because she used to work at Project Independence, and I don't know, just, I could see that being an avenue for getting it going a little bit more.
Mary, how are things, or Nancy, how are things on the interview front?
So all of the interviews are in, thanks to Mary and Elizabeth and Sally and you, Krista. And with Krista's help, I was connecting with Christopher Ross at the Addison Independent, and he went on vacation, and then we went back and forth a little bit. And what the Addison Independent has agreed to is to post the stories on their website, partly because it's way too big for a newspaper article. So I've been working on pulling pieces together. I've done some transcribing from the recordings, and I would have to say that I've read it a million times now, and it still just about brings tears to my eyes. The stories are just stunning. So I finished it today, and I sent it to Christopher Ross today. And what we have there are interviews from 2 elementary school students, a middle school student, and a high school student, the superintendent, and an elementary principal and the high school principal, an elementary teacher, a middle school teacher, and a high school teacher. I think that's all of them. And it really tells such an amazing story. And I was just so grateful about what came in, and thank you everybody, because I know that wasn't an easy thing to make happen, the folks who were interviewing. And you sent me great stuff, and really basically what I sent to Christopher was an introduction. And because we asked everyone the same set of questions, I organized it by question. So there's an introduction, and then for each question, there's the set of answers that we got from all of those people. And it's a compelling, multi-leveled story. And sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's sad. And but I think it really paints a picture that certainly will make people proud that they live and work and have kids in this school district, if they're not already feeling that. And I guess I should also say that I just sent it out today, so I'm feeling this great sense of relief about this piece is off my desk. But I'm also thinking about pitching it to a more national audience, and we'll see if I get my act together to get that going. It'd have to be significantly shorter.
Go ahead, Kim. You.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Is there a place does the community engagement group have a website, or are there pages where you could post those? And then that would be the thing that even on our own community front porch forums, we could let people know about this project, and then put a link in there so that people could go to read those interviews and learn more about it, which would be great.
Definitely.
If I could just say, what I'm hoping is that the Addison Independent will post it on their website in its entirety, and we'll be able to link to that for a whole bunch of different audiences, local audiences. So I want to certainly, Christopher Ross said he's working on a big special issue and he'll be reading the piece on Thursday and getting back to me quickly. So, but I think you're right, Kim. I think if we can, once it's up there, calling people's attention to it in a lot of different ways, as you suggested, will be great.
And once we have a link that we can share, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the social media outlets become a more viable option as well.
Absolutely, and I will be asking them to not have a firewall around it so that people can, so it's a public link. They've done that for me before, so.
Good.
Nancy, were you able to put people's names or not put people's names in?
I didn't put anyone's name in,
Okay.
but the recognizable people by role will be Patrick and the high school principal.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to, so thank you guys for this work that I think is just really helpful during this time for people to feel connected, and parts and pieces we might be able to continue doing when we're not feeling so disconnected, whenever that might be. Before we shift to the next piece, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I just did want to acknowledge we have Christopher Pepe, who's not Christopher Ross from the Addison Independent, but is a community member who joined us for a few of our engagement meetings, and he and I have communicated a little bit, and so he's here, and I just wanted to say hi and glad you could be with us, and feel free to introduce yourself briefly if you are up for it.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just a community member. I like to kind of try to stay involved in these things. I've got a son that's in first grade and another one that'll be in the school system soon. So we've taken a keen interest in the school system at large, and then especially now as we're trying to figure out before all this and now in this, what the future of education looks like in this town. So I'm glad to participate as much as I can. I'll make as many of these as I can.
Thank you. So I think I'd love to just open this up to the two ideas that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and see what people think. And I think it might, the final item on the agenda is an update from the feasibility study committee meeting that I think some folks on this call attended as well. But I think it leads well to that conversation. There is a lot that's going on in our communities, and a lot of stress and uncertainty that people are feeling. And I think, again, our role is to make sure people feel connected and informed, but also empowered to find a way they can be part of decision-making, solution, problem solving. So understanding the challenges that we're facing is a big piece of that, but then also for our group to work with the school board to understand what ways people can actually sort of have their voice matter is also important. So, so the first thing that I mentioned was this kind of town hall idea. So, we are coming up on the end of the school year. Just even among this group, we have questions about what summer might look like, what fall might look like, what it's been like this past year. And, obviously nobody knows all of the answers, but I think there are many, many people besides just those of us here who might like a chance to hear a little bit more, from folks who know a little bit more about how things are going. So that kind of idea of a town hall meeting was the first thing. And then the second was, thinking about how to bring different members of our community together, because we recognize that what the schools are facing financially connects to the challenges in many other aspects of our communities. And is there a place to bring together, business leaders, social service leaders, school leaders, select board members? What would this committee be interested in, working to try to structure some sort of gathering of people that for a larger conversation about all these things and how they relate to our schools. So I don't know really, maybe we'll start with the town hall idea, but just kind of want to open it up to those two things and see what people think.
Well, I'll just say that I think it's a great idea. Both of them are great ideas. I'm really happy that you're thinking about it and you're sharing it, and let's talk about how to do it. Sounds great.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it'll be interesting as we start to kind of workshop what it would actually look like to make it be very welcoming to community members. That's just I don't know, maybe I'm feeling a little discouraged as I look out and see snow and like Patrick had said, there's definitely some fatigue settling in right now. So I think that that's a call to reach out to the community as much as we can to provide information as much as we can. And yet I don't have a vision of what that looks like. So I would love to just workshop that.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I too think both are great ideas, and it will be fascinating to figure out, perhaps with Sue's help, how to structure them. I would say that although it wasn't a surprise tonight to hear Patrick say that school wasn't going to look like normal school in the fall, I still found that it took my breath away a little bit. And I'm wondering about whether, and it took my breath away because of partly in my family's personal situation and many other families' personal situations, that has such an impact on people's employment possibilities. So I guess one of the things I was wondering about, in addition to both of these great ideas, is whether it's going to be important to get a message that edges toward that out to people sooner rather than waiting to the end of the school year. Even with all the uncertainty about what it's going to actually look like, I know that my kids will need to really think through, begin to get their brains wrapped around that.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, totally love the ideas. And I was thinking this week, like, what do we know from the community? Like, what is our job? And I was thinking, like, well, all we did over the past year was kind of unearthing those values that everyone came to in our district. And if we could somehow wrap that into, so it's not just an informative thing, which I don't think that's what you were envisioning, but to somehow maybe have us all be thinking out of the box of how we could, address those values in a way that's, we have to think out of the box because it's going to be totally different in the fall. And then 2021, it's going to be totally different. So maybe just asking good questions that generate some ideas about that. I don't know. I just think we should fold those values into the town hall meeting. Just because that's all we know from the community so far. That's what we kind of came to.
Go ahead, Andrew. And feel free to just unmute yourself unless there's, people talking over each other. Just go for it. Oh, I think you need to, hold on, let me unmute you. There you go.
Yeah, I tried the space bar. I guess it didn't work. So is the idea that this would be an actual physical in-person town hall meeting, or that we would do it virtually somehow?
I guess I assumed physical's off the table.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the assumption we would need to make, but yeah.
So I guess it's also just a really logistical question of how we bring that potential number of people together to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a way to do it in groups of 10.
Well, within Zoom, you can have breakout rooms as well.
Yep.
Krista, did you have a chance at all to talk with Sue about this idea?
Not really. Correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick or Don, but I don't think we really talked about that much. Patrick, do you recall?
No, I don't think we talked about this specifically. You and I had a chance to talk about the idea, and it started with the notion of some sort of a recorded video that could be distributed in a lot of different ways to get a broader audience. You know, there are pros and cons to something that's live versus recorded. That's worth thinking through. You know, if it's something that's pre-recorded, we can be a little bit more, we can cover the points that are important, that we think are important for people to know, or that we hear from people that they want to know about. And it can be a little bit more succinct and then distributed. You know, recording a town hall that is more live, though virtual, is going to be less efficient, and people will just need to hold their attention longer to get the information that they might want to have. So I don't know. I think it's worth thinking through the pre-recorded versus the live. But that is something that we had a chance to talk through, but I don't think we talked about it a lot with Sue.
Yeah, and I wonder if we could reach out to the community via Front Porch Forum, or, you know, all the different various means of communication that we have, to ask for questions that the community is having and collect those questions, and then see which ones we're able to answer or just touch upon. You know, like Mary's saying, also bringing in the values, because I think that's been a very rich part of this process. That is something that we have, and that's informative. That's progress. That's something that we can use as a foundation in this messaging. And then, yeah, I think the pre-recorded thing is the way to go. And I know that that Lincolnites would love to hear from Tori. You know, they'd love to hear from Patrick, but I'm sure they would also love to hear from Tori and from leadership. I mean, it's something that I hear at the town meeting. They say, okay, the district, we're broke, and, you know, we got to do something, but how is Lincoln doing? And so as much as everybody wants to know, like, what's actually going to happen with our schools, I think they'd also like to hear from the voice of the person who is like, you know, steering the ship of the school that their kids are going to.
I guess I just think that before we go, I don't think there's much that we can do about design of either of these pieces unless we are very clear about our purposes. And once we're very clear about our purposes, that's going to make the design work much easier. So yeah, I think perhaps we need a smaller group to sit down together and hammer out, you know, what really are, maybe not sit down together. I'm sorry I said that, but it's what I'm used to picturing. And hammer out what the purposes really are, and then use that to do the design.
Another idea that I had was that, you know, we can kind of all muse about that ourselves. What would we see as the goals be? What would this design look like? And possibly see if Sue might be able to join us next time. We are meeting twice a month, so you know, we could have that be the focus of the next agenda. Is we would like to do this. Time is, you know, kind of the essence. We have, you know, here's some thoughts. Can we hammer out a plan with you? That might be another way to move forward.
And about the other idea of bringing all the leaders together, the community leaders, I love that idea. And I think right now it's showing that the school is the hub of the community. I mean, and I'm so impressed that we have the biggest one in the state, the biggest childcare. That's I had no idea that was how rock star we are. But so I think just capitalizing on that, like, okay, let's continue being the hub. Let's figure out how we can collaborate more and, you know, just make it a little bit more, and I hate the word efficient because that's not really what we're getting at. We're getting at more like just smooth collaboration, I guess. But yeah, I love that idea.
Patrick, what's your sense? I mean, it seems to me like trying to have some sort of wrap up for the school year would be probably the first priority, and then summer as a time to see about convening, or after that, as a time to talking about convening these groups of folks and coming up with some sort of plan. Do you agree if that makes sense in terms of, you know, capacity to do both of those things? Or what are you thinking about these ideas and how they would roll out time-wise? And
Sure. I'm not sure it much matters between now and next May. As I think about wrapping up this school year, the summertime being planning for the fall, which will look very different, the fall trying to get things off the ground and respond as we try to build what could be an even different looking ship than anything we've had so far, leading into budget building, continuing the conversation about our long range facilities planning, some potential really hard and big important decisions we have to make in the near future to get a budget to pass, all of that leading up to town meeting day. That's what makes me think basically from 2 months ago to next May are going to be kind of wild and crazy times. So I'm not sure it matters a whole lot within that window where any of these projects might take place. So I wouldn't worry too much about where it fits in best. We'll just make it work.
Darla, can I put you on the spot as a new select board member to Bristol and get your reactions to that second idea?
Can you restate the second idea? I'm sorry.
So sort of bringing together select board members, school officials, other folks, you know, business leaders, people in the community that are in some sort of leadership role that has a stake in our schools and how they impact our whole community.
Yeah, I mean, in my whole 2 months experience as a select board member, I can tell you that I personally think it's a wonderful idea. I think the more people we can have at the table and communicating with those people, the better. Because from those tables that will go out to each of their, it'll just, finger out more and more. I think it's a great idea. What that could look like, is it a group like this? Is it a matter of inviting folks like yourself to join in the select board meetings and having you on the agenda? Getting for people on agendas at different tables. Is that what it looks like? I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm just not sure the mechanics of how it would work. And what's the point we'd want to bring, again, getting that purpose of that really clear and making sure that we are, making good use of the time at each of those tables and having a clear message at each table. But yeah, as far as communicating, Nancy was saying earlier, if school is going to look different in the fall, the sooner we start to let people know that, they can start to wrap their mind around that as they're dealing with after school care and child care right now, and with those reopening and with very limited restrictions put on them for the youngest students. That's a real challenge for families, and the way that the state has been sort of putting that information out all at once, and so everybody hears it, like the field doesn't hear it before parents are hearing it, so there's no preparation time. The more preparation that we can help to give folks, in my opinion, is better for families. So I think it's a great idea, Krista, and I'd be happy to work on a team to figure out what that would look like and the best use of those times at those tables.
One of the things that I recall you and I talking a little bit about, Krista, was trying to actually avoid sort of the traveling road show, just because I think it then, the school then stays exclusively the linchpin between all 5 communities. The idea was really more about bringing all those players together to the same table rather than traveling to multiple tables, and having an opportunity for some of that cross-pollination and the value there would be lost if we were traveling to multiple select boards.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I just want to make sure I understand the general purposes of these 2 pieces. The end of the school year possible town hall meeting, if I'm hearing correctly, is partly about how are we going to, as a community, support each other through more time of things not being the way we remember they used to be. And the second one, the collaboration with school, among school and town officials, our town mothers and fathers and so forth, that piece is on the general topic of fiscal year 21 financial pressures and related facilities decisions. Am I parsing those, generally speaking, as the 2 different concepts that people would be talking about in those 2 different meetings, or have I gotten that wrong?
I think the second one, yes. The first one, I guess maybe is open to discussion a little bit, but I think it might be twofold. One is really just in informing folks about where things stand as we know them. You know, what's happened over the year, you know, maybe a little of the behind the scenes sort of why, and what we know might, or what we think might happen in the summer and what we think might happen in the fall, and a little bit of the why. So more kind of sharing information out that might lead to then other opportunities for back and forth and problem solving out of that. But I think, you know, initially be sort of sharing information out, and then the second piece is more about coming together to discuss shared challenges and finding solutions toward those.
But I mean, are the topics of the first meeting at the end of the school year, is that more about, or let me put it another way, is it independent of the conversation, pretty independent of the conversation about facilities and FY21 or FY22 funding and all of that? Is that first meeting more about how we're going to get through this next phase of the pandemic together, and independent of the facilities and those other issues? Or do you see them, Krista, as both being about sort of the same set of issues?
I guess I'm still formulating and really looking to you guys to help figure out what would be most useful. But I think there's probably a space for both of those things, that, you know, the way things might look in the school, but also what we're facing as a district financially, are both pieces of information we'd very much want people to be aware of.
Because I mean, I may be wrong, but having attended the first facilities committee meeting and hearing Patrick talk about shifts in the timeline for that, it's hard to imagine that over the summer there's going to be much conclusion from the facilities committee in answer to the questions they're exploring. And until they've addressed those questions, it's going to be hard for a conversation about facilities to take us any farther than the community was when we were last talking about it.
That's true, but we will, as a board, be contemplating the very beginnings of the budget building process, which is coming at.
Oh, sorry, Krista.
No, go ahead.
That somehow we have a sort of regularly scheduled update from all of this effort. And this, this town hall could be one of those things, but it feels to me that you don't want to, we did a lot of work and you don't want to have a big chunk of time from the last time everybody got together and worked together to the next time that we communicate with one another. And maybe this town hall is that opportunity to have that communication. And the important information that Patrick shares with us is the kind of information that the community needs to hear. And so not to add too many things to too many people's plates, but having a regular town hall, or here is the update. And even if it's a video interview, here's the update about where we are, and things are changing so much. Just that touch point for people, it's a place they can go every month or every month and a half. It's like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what the budget looks like. This is what the federal government's talking about, providing for the states. This is what the shortfall is going to be. This is what the district is doing. It's a state of the union kind of address. And I think that I see the town hall as, we did go out to the community to get some input. And so I'm not sure how much more input we want right now. I feel like what the community would really love is some output and some information about what's happening and kind of where we are in the timeline that we talked with them about when we all got together. So that's just when I think about this idea and what you're talking about, it feels like it'd be great to, even if it was just a recorded video of here's where we are, Patrick's little thing that he did at the beginning of this meeting, like that would be such a great thing to share with the community.
But set to music, Patrick, kind of a music video, little rock and roll.
And dancing, of course.
Something uplifting.
with backup dancers.
Figure out a cool background.
And I guess as I think about them too, I think about the town hall as sort of thin engagement, sharing of information. Here's what's happening. Here's a little projection with all the caveats that we may have to give with any projections. And when I'm thinking about the bringing together the leaders of the 5 towns, to me, that's more thick engagement. That's some collaborative problem solving. Something that surfaced this fall was an interest in exploring possibilities on how we might reverse these trends that are creating some hardships for us. And the people to bring together for MAUSD, at least, are the leaders of our 5 towns to talk about what could or should be done, whether it's organizing advocacy at the state level, or it's something to do with town plans or zoning or jobs if we're bringing in business owners. Some of the answers to being able to reverse this trend may lie within the right people sitting around a table collaboratively problem solving this. It's certainly outside of the control of exclusively the school district. It's going to take collaboration and putting heads together and talking about, Krista and I were joking the other day a little bit about the notion of public-private partnership has surfaced a lot, but I think there's a lot more public-public partnership that could be happening than what there currently is. And this may be a mix of multiple public entities and some private entities coming together to talk about some options that might exist. So that's where I was thinking with that other group coming together.
I see.
That may hold some possibilities.
I think that makes perfect sense, Patrick. I think an example that we don't want to follow is what happened with the state colleges, where Jeb made this recommendation and everybody lost their mind, and now Jeb doesn't have a job. So We don't want to see any of that happening. To have that coordinated effort is a great way to.
Yes, I agree. Patrick, do we know right now, right now that the fall's not going to be looking like it is in normal times?
Sadly, there's not a lot I know right now. There's
Right.
speculation.
I know, right. Yeah, exactly.
And it's not so much a concrete for sure, I know with absolute certainty. It's more, it's highly, highly unlikely that the fall is going to look like this past fall did. Just because I can't imagine really the key is a vaccine, right? So it's a race to a vaccine. Once there's a vaccine and it's widely distributed, then things can maybe return to what we have come to know or what we used to know as normal. I don't know that we think of that as normal anymore, but I think it's highly unlikely that we have a vaccine developed and widely distributed before the fall. And we may not have it at any point next school year even. So it's really looking at those public health indicators that are making it seem quite clear that school in the fall won't be 650 kids at Mount Abe every day, for example.
Like, I wonder, kind of like what Darla was saying before, like whether you should maybe have just a quick video just saying that almost. Like, I don't know. I don't have kids, so I don't know how parents are orienting, but I feel like I don't know. That was like a wake up call to me to like, geez, holy cow. Okay, here we go. And we all know this. I hear it every day on the radio that we're not ready in the fall, but yeah, I don't know.
And the only risk is getting their anxiety increased with having no details to offer and no absolute certainty behind any of the statements. And so to me, that's the risk, right? So the notion of transparency and sharing what we think we know right now is great, except that for some people to have that reaction and have nothing to sort of bring them down from that heightened anxiety in terms of clarity and procedural next steps kinds of things, there's just a risk.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But you shouldn't have to shoulder the uncertainty yourself, Patrick. I mean, it helps me. I know it. I mean, my daughter and son-in-law who have kids in the school, it will help them to know that it's not certain. I mean, we're getting such mixed messages from Washington and from the state and from the CDC and so forth, that as we've been hearing, oh, well, they're going to open up retail in Vermont on Monday. And when I heard that, I thought, well, gosh, that probably means that they're going to really open up school as normal. I mean, that's where my head went with it. So I'm just, I know it's not comfortable to share your uncertainty with the world, but it's not your fault that you're uncertain, and it helps us. I think is going to help my family be thinking differently, even though they know they can't make plans yet. To know that it's a question about whether school would look like regular school in the fall or not, and likely it won't.
Right. And I also, something that I've been appreciating is the governor's press conference every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I mean, and a lot of the questions he's unable to answer. And that's been something that's been so refreshing, is that he just says, I don't know. He's got obviously a team of specialists that are managing the different sectors of the government. But I've been just so impressed and calmed by his presence, his willingness to say he doesn't know, his willingness to take responsibility and apologize for things that aren't going well. And so I think just conveying that to our community, like, we don't have all the answers, but we're, I'm here for you to, like, I'll try to give you as much information as I possibly can, which isn't much, but this is kind of where we are at this point. Yeah, and I like Kim's idea of it being something that they can rely on. I mean, I've been like maybe strangely relying on those press conferences, but just like once a month, did they know that like, okay, so we're going to hear from Secretary French on Friday, but we're going to hear from Patrick Green, our local leader, you know, the third Wednesday of the month. And so that kind of just like points to something.
It might be interesting to also, you know, if you like the team of experts Sarah just referenced, you know, it might, you know, the rumor mill flies, and it might be interesting for people to, you know, maybe hear from Susan Brule, like here's how it's going on the special ed front, or from Kathy Alexander. You know, the robocalls are awesome, but they only reach, I think, you know, the people on the MAUSD list, right? So if this gets traction, I think it will help dispel some rumors, and it will just be that consistent, regular face, which could be hugely helpful.
But all that being said, I mean, I think now I understand better what your thinking has been about both these pieces. I really like, I mean, it helped me to have you say, Patrick, thin engagement and thick engagement, that the first piece is, and as Kim said, keeping in touch with people, letting them know how things have progressed since we last checked in with them about the kind of facilities, school enrollment issues, and what's happened since then, and kind of what the picture looks like and what we don't know and what we do about that. But then a thick collaboration meeting, problem solving around, oh, I don't know, things like how to take advantage of the urban flight that's going to be headed our way, you know,
Yeah.
it could easily happen.
Yeah.
And other ways to reverse enrollment decline. I mean, I think that will be also a fascinating meeting to design.
And for me, that meeting, because it's all interconnected, right? So there's enrollment decline is in, you know, the population of Vermont isn't necessarily declining. It's not growing at the rate that other states might be, but our population's aging more rapidly than other places, and less people are working in the workforce. And like, so enrollment decline is indicative of other demographic challenges that
Absolutely.
are for our region and our state, which is part of what puts us all has us all invested in finding a solution. Yeah, so it's bigger than education, but that's a big piece of it.
But it's fascinating, I think, to think about how this pandemic has underscored the importance of widespread broadband, and how widespread broadband could really change the picture of employment availability in Vermont.
I think that was the specific example I used in my conversation with Krista the other day about, even if the 5 towns came together and said, we're going to figure out broadband in our 5 towns, and we are going to be the beacon for Vermont in solid broadband access. That alone, as a one sort of concrete focused objective, could help shift our demographics more so than other regions.
Than almost anything.
Sure.
Than almost anything.
Well, I think the other thing that you just said, Patrick, too, is that changing demographics and the need for more services for our seniors, so that if we can combine from a facilities point of view, opportunities for seniors and resources for seniors that is dovetailed with the needs of our students. You know, there you're addressing 2 things with more horsepower and a broader you know, swath of the community, and working together to come up with those creative solutions is going to address some of that. So yeah, I think that's exciting, and that would be a really fun meeting to sit in on and be able to watch it all happen.
And I think when there's some grassroots efforts to collaborate and problem solve like this because this is something the state's going to be looking at too. If we demonstrate some sort of an organization or organizational structure that says, hey, we're already working on this in a collaborative way for this region, I think that garners more support from the state level to say, all right, we want to support what you have going on because you could become a model for other regions. I don't know. I just think it does so many good things, or at least potentially does so many good things to put our heads together and work on this together. And even the 5 towns is somewhat of an arbitrary boundary. It's something that there's a structure around that we could organize around. So.
And I think that's a great project, Patrick, when you're talking about bringing in partners from select board and business, and that's something that they're all going to benefit from. It would benefit the entire community, not just the school community. So that's a perfect project for something like that. And I think that's great.
Really quickly, I just wanted to go off of what Sarah was saying about the governor's address, and totally, absolutely agreed. And Patrick, if you are you are our school leader, and if you could remind, like, I love when leaders remind us that, like, hey, it's not just the school's responsibility to take care of every, like, you can just remind us all to pitch in, like that could be a way, just to, I don't know, it drives me nuts that schools take on everything, and I feel like it's a way for you to balance that a little bit, like, hey, we're all in these uncertain times, we all got to take care of our kids, Yeah.
So I'm really excited because I feel like a lot of people wanted to be part of this conversation that's ebbed and flowed a lot for a while, but it's the energy that you all bring, I think, can help move some really great pieces together. And I want to talk a little bit about the feasibility study committee work, but to kind of close this out, I'm thinking, Patrick, it sounded like this, PR piece might be, it sounds like we're making a suggestion that you would probably then enact. Does that sound right? Do you want to check back in on what you're thinking that might look like with us before you run with it? Because if that is the case, then I was imagining maybe our meeting in 2 weeks would focus more on how do we bring together these leaders. How do we make sure that whatever you've put together, we get out, whatever town hall piece you put together, we get out as much as we can to the community, but that we spend our discussion time next time on this, the second idea. What's your reaction to that, or anyone else's, before we move on?
Yeah, I'm comfortable taking it and running with it. I think the wondering that I have is, I myself, and certainly with a small group of folks, I can come up with what I think information people want to know, or perhaps this group can help gather the questions that people are interested in having some answers to, knowing that there may not be concrete answers, but at least that'll give me some direct feedback from folks in the community about what they want, because this isn't necessarily about me trying to satisfy needs I have. This is about me trying to satisfy needs a community has, and I'd like to have something better than my hunch on what people want to know to build this around.
So what if we each just check in with ourselves about the questions we have and a few other people that we know? I don't think we need to put the call out to the universe, but probably among us and a couple of conversations we could have with we know, we'd collect plenty of questions. And then that would be useful to you and your team in planning what it might look like.
That would be really helpful. And then what I'm sort of imagining is almost a Zoom call like this that is somewhat orchestrated with me doing some facilitation. So I would answer some questions, but I would have Susan and Katrina and Floyd and Andy and, Kathy Alexander, key leaders trying to address some of those, trying to think about your point too, Sarah, which I think is a good one. How to weave in building leaders. That gets a little complicated because, there are 5 elementary school principals and different towns that want to hear from each of them. And so I'll have to think that through to get their voice incorporated somehow. But I can figure that out. And some of that will be driven by the kinds of questions that come about. So, but basically recording a structure like this that you can see everyone's faces and you can hear what they're having to say. And then we'll try to keep it somewhat succinct and, something that we can distribute pretty broadly for folks to see.
I actually would say maybe just to counter that idea, Nance, about not putting it out to the universe, but what if we did put it at Front Porch Forum just because it's an act of, we're not going to get crazy questions that are they're all going to be about the same questions, I would think. And that would show that we want to hear, what do you want to know? And then I'm sure we could put them into 10 question answer, I don't think it's going to be too chaotic if we put it out there.
Maybe so. But what would we be saying? We'd be saying, we're interested in knowing what questions you have about the school district and the coming school year, and could you send them to us by such a date, and we'll be forwarding them on to the administrative team of the school district, and they'll be doing everything they can to answer your questions. Is that what it sounds like?
The one piece I would add to that, because again, I want to manage expectations a little bit. Probably more than 50% of the questions that are going to be asked, I won't have answers for. I'll be able to speak to and speculate, but there won't be answers. I don't want to set the expectation that all of your questions will be answered, because it's unrealistic.
Maybe it's a top 10 questions or something like that, or 10 questions that you can give answers to. Maybe we collect them and boil them down to 10 basic things or something like that.
I'm not sure I can come up with 10 questions.
Okay, five questions.
But remember, Patrick, you can say, I don't know. You're not expected to know. Right. The governor's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to do my best. That's all we can ask. We're not, we know that. Everyone hopefully knows.
Well, and part of that message is, here's what we're doing to try to get answers, but we don't have the answers yet. And
I wonder if it might be more successful for the first one to be more of what Patrick was saying about sort of laying out just where we are, what's happening, where we're going, and then if it can become something that happens on a regular basis, to then sort of open it up to community questions, because it's a bit of a trial, and I feel like the more Patrick can sort of control, the more successful it's going to be, so that it can be something that's ongoing and that can happen over and over. Because if it just, we get 100 questions and people want to know about AP classes, and then people want to know about Hannaford Career Center, and it's just it'll get drilled down to such specific things that the whole intent of this, I think, could end up getting lost. But that's just my feeling. See how it goes, and then if there isn't enough horsepower, if there isn't enough information for people, then that can be feedback that we can all provide and the community can provide. And we can say, okay, make sure you listen to this town hall from the school leaders, and you'll have an opportunity at another town hall to have your questions answered about what's going to happen. Just so people sort of get the format and they understand who the players are, they understand what the tone is. There's so much about it that's still being developed on our end, that if we help set that tone from the beginning and then invite people to come in, I think it might be a little more, have a better chance of being more successful from the get-go.
I'd like to.
It's useful. That's very doable. I could, in terms of sort of the buckets, I started out with today, so a quick overview of how the continuation of learning is going, food service, childcare. Those are sort of buckets that are happening now. Then we have end of year, what's going to happen with summer programming, and what's the beginning of next year. those are some of the big buckets that probably a lot of questions fall into, and I could just give an overview of that, and I could, you know, I can toss different portions of those questions to other folks on the team to give responses, because I think I recognize as the leader my voice is important, and I need to be out in the front, and I think it's valuable for other people who are leading to have their voices heard and be a familiar face and a familiar voice to the community as well, which is why we've been recording Kathy's voice to distribute out to families around food service things. And I know building principals are sending out messages as well, just to let folks know that there's a team of people around this and working on it and here to support our community. So that's certainly doable from my perspective, if that feels like a good starting point.
Absolutely. And I also really did appreciate when you did speak to us in this meeting and how you did mention fatigue, because it's nice to hear that you identify, like, even though like so much good is going, given the situation that we're in, that there is also this fatigue setting in. So then I don't know, it just kind of like lets you be like, oh, okay, you know,
right,
y'all are understanding.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So Patrick, I wonder if that our next gathering is the 26th. If you kind of did a dry run for us or shared with us what you've come up with. I mean, does that sound reasonable at that point? And or do you just want to take what we have and
yeah, I would probably try to time it for something close to this meeting, just because, so the hard part is whatever we put together will become old news pretty quickly, because things are evolving pretty rapidly.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want to have something done 3 weeks or 2 weeks before the next meeting, because then we've already missed the boat. Like, so it has to get launched pretty soon after it's created for it to remain relevant when it goes out.
I think that what you did tonight was great, and that would be really valuable for the people to hear, and do that soon. And that would be the first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which would mean not waiting to run it by this group.
Yeah.
No.
I think I'm hearing.
You just ran it by us.
Which is fine. It's fine. As long as there's music and dancing, I think it's just going to go fine.
And we can just
I have to draw
get
the
word
line
out.
of dancing. Nope. As much as nobody wants to hear me sing, really nobody wants to see me dance.
I think getting the word out, Krista, is you know,
that'll be our job.
Update, just so we can make sure people know where to tune in and what the vehicle is.
Well, it'll be a link, right? Once you do it, it'll be a link that we can post in a lot of different places.
Yep. And we can post it too through our mechanisms with social media and whatnot. I think another important role for this group would be to sort of have an ear to the ground and try to have a sense of what's the buzz following that, and what by and what did it not satisfy, as we think about second and more iterations of that.
Yeah.
And that's when hopefully we can put something out at the Front Porch Forum. That's when we can hopefully get the community like, what do you feel? What are you wondering? You know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be interesting to have it eventually have an interesting name too, like the such and such update, or, you know, just so it's something, interesting title, so that people look forward to their, you know, update. We
started a video series. It was really last fall, and it kind of lost steam. I think we called it the
nice.
Minute or the Mount Abe Minute or something like that, trying to keep it brief. And was, you know, once or twice a month to just do a quick blast out on, you know, some of the hot topics for that month. So this may have to be a little bit longer given the sort of town hall nature, and we're covering a lot of ground with a lot of faces, but yeah, we'll see what name takes shape.
That's awesome. Thank you, Patrick, for hearing all of this and being willing to give it a whirl, because I think it will be hugely helpful. And, you know, we'll give it a try and we'll see what worked and what didn't. But the main thing is the communication. And then let's all kind of chew on the other idea and talk more in depth about that at our next meeting. So I did want to just maybe, Kevin, would you be willing to give an update from the feasibility study committee? I know Nancy and Sally and Mary and I were there. Darla, I think maybe was there as maybe not. Anyway, not everybody was there, but it would be great to just sort of hear how that kicked off, and maybe if folks have any questions about that, we can spend a little bit of time on that.
Okay, there was organizational meeting, obviously. We talked about format, introduced ourselves. We had an overview from Patrick, and because of time constraints, it didn't go into the level of depth that we're a very varied board as far as experience. We obviously got administration people there that can dream this stuff, and then we've got a couple board members that have been hearing right along from that level, and then we've got 2 community members that at least one of them has been involved in some of the community engagement, but their level of depth or insight, or however you want to term that, is probably light. So tried to balance that a little bit, but and then in the interest of time, we did overview the history a little bit and the next steps. But I would think, particularly if I was in their shoes, I'd have a ton of more questions. They had quite a packet of information ahead of time. We talked about, as Patrick has discussed at board meetings at least, about using a contractor, I guess you could say, or consultant that has an expertise in analysis of schools and capacities and whatnot. And we as a group pretty much agreed that that's the reasonable way to proceed with this. One of the community members is actually an associate principal with Freeman French, and he pretty much laid it right out that if they had the job, that's exactly what they would be doing, turning around to somebody and kind of like, we'll get the interface and information firsthand. So that was a great confirmation. We are going to try to meet on a monthly basis. That Jennifer's in the process of organizing that, so we can keep things going, even though the consultants that Patrick selected won't be actually feet on the ground, if you will, until schools are back to some normalcy. I think that's pretty much covers what we talked about, at least.
I was just thinking that it might be worth the consultants thinking about the fact that it might not be back to normalcy, just so that they're not creating a plan that is not really relevant. You know, it's worth thinking that way.
Yeah, in my conversations with them, they fully recognize that the fall is an unknown right now. So the timeline, and Krista mentioned this earlier, that the timeline is going to need to be adjusted as a result of COVID-19, because part of the study involves the folks with sort of feet on the ground, as Kevin said, in the school, and that would have been happening this spring had we been in session. Obviously that won't happen now this spring. It'll happen at the earliest in the fall. So the timeline that we drafted a while back had the hopes of the study from this consultant, so the New England School Development Council, having that study completed by July, so that at the August retreat, the board could review the study, hear my thoughts on the study, and think about next steps in terms of bringing information back to the community for the next round of community engagement. With COVID-19 doing what it's doing and schools not being in session, they're looking at probably a November, December timeline for that study to be complete now instead of July. And that's assuming that school resumes in the fall. Now, if we're back in some sort of a hybrid model in the fall, maybe there's a way that they can get the information they need under those circumstances. If they can't do what they need to do until school's fully back in session, then our timeline is very much up in the air, which is unfortunate because in all likelihood, our financial reality timeline isn't changing, even though our study timeline is going to have some significant delay.
The other thing that I'd like to add, and it wasn't discussed at the meeting, but in the packet information was a proposal from the consultants, and their approach is pretty impressive. They're in-depth analysis for student populations, their projections. They're projecting out for 10 years, which I thought was pretty amazing. And the strategies they use to develop those projections are very complete. And then the rationale that they use to assess classroom capacity, if you will, takes into account not only students but programs as well. So I think you know, this particular group has going to give us a lot of information and provide us a lot of expertise and provide us with a lot of depth and background.
And we also recognize there may be areas where they fall short. Like we're not going to get the complete sort of facilities analysis in terms of structural need, et cetera, that we might get if we went with an architectural firm, but we can always pursue that next level of information as is warranted after this sort of initial phase of a study.
I also think that we're going to learn a lot about education in the next year and a half that is going to be possibly different than what we've known for many, many years. So I just think we should be open to watching how education shifts in the next year or so because of this COVID thing and how that could be something that is worth thinking about in the future. Like, it's not like it's ever going to really be totally over probably in general as far as viruses or groups. We don't really know. So we should just be aware of that.
Yeah. It's a revolution, and good things come out of revolution. Things that normally wouldn't happen or would take years to formulate can happen quickly in circumstance like this. And I've just been so impressed with the school system and how they've been able to pivot and do that. So hats off.
I think to your point too, Sally, again, this is my opinion, not this committee's opinion, but Scott in one of his news conferences probably a couple weeks ago, I don't pay much attention to him, but he was discussing a lot of the financial issues with the state budget, and of course the educational aspects of it came up with it. And his comment was that something's got to change with the way schools operate and the cost of schools. And he said, I could give $1 billion. There's a lot of smart people in the state I could give $1 billion to come up with a better system, and it wouldn't look like anything we have today.
You know, having read all of the interviews, I would say that one thing that's clear in just about every single one of them is that there's some wonderful things happening with remote teaching, but really deep learning that sticks depends on elements that remote teaching can't provide. So when I think about what Sally was saying, I would just say remote teaching will probably have a greater role going forward when we've got a vaccine and all of this is behind us, because there's some wonderful things it can do, but there's some real gaps. And when you read the interviews, you'll see what people are missing that feels really important to teaching and learning. And that's important stuff to keep in mind, I think.
I just want to say that I didn't mean that, oh, everything's going to go to remote. It might not be the revolution that happens, you know. I just think there could be a lot of shifts.
Yes, absolutely. And there's some wonderful shifts happening. Oh gosh, I can't wait for you to read it all. It's neat.
Hey, speaking of which, can you send that to those of us who are on this call? I mean, I would love to see that.
You will see it, but I want to wait till I hear back from the Addison Independent and see what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I will definitely get it to you.
So we have 12 minutes left, but your point, Sally, in this conversation is a good segue to another piece of this, our partnership with the feasibility study committee. And so a couple of things on that. One, Kevin, I think, is going to join the check-in calls that Sue and Patrick and Don and I have, which will be great to ensure that there's good communication between the chairs of these two groups. And, you know, that we can think about where in this process we can continue to be involving the community. That's going to be really important, an evolving piece. But something else that I think is going to be important as well is, you know, in what way and space do we provide for the emergence of new thinking that may not have taken place in the fall, but is still, you know, might be worth considering in some way. And you know, I'd like us to talk maybe more about that on our next call, but, you know, is this group kind of a vetting for some of those ideas? Do we share them with Kevin's committee and let them sort of work through them? How do we keep honor and integrity in the process in the fall that generated some really powerful values that our community is really committed to, and, you know, be open to how those look without devaluing the participation of all the people that you know, did engage already. So I think that's going to be an evolving conversation. You know, we can pretty much guarantee that as we get closer to having to make hard conversations, there's going to be more and more of an interest in exploring lots of different avenues. Some of them will align well with conversations that have already happened and will already be contemplated by the facilities feasibility group, and others might be new, and how we navigate those, I think, is going to be important for us to continue to talk about. But in the meantime, you'll see on your agenda that Sue put together a tool that I think is important. You know, we might want to modify it, but you know, that was just her first attempt at capturing our values and creating a rubric we could use for all of the decision making that the board contemplates. You know, how well do those decisions align with our community values? So I think that is the piece to keep at the forefront. So before we wrap up, I'm going to steal a page from Kevin's chairing of the facilities committee, which he asked everyone to go around and just share if they had any lingering thoughts or comments before we close, which I really liked, because I think some of us have a minute, you know, need a minute or two to chew on things, and you can pass if you don't want to share. But I think it's a good way to sort of close things out. Kevin, you're raising your hand. If you want to add anything.
Krista, I can't take much credit for that. I stole that from the Bristol Select Board.
Okay, well, I really like that. So whoever gets it, I like it. So yeah, so I you know, there's a lot more to say on all of these things, but it's late and we're all probably ready to sign off. So for now, let's just, and you can pass if you'd like, but I'm going to go by who I see in my screen in what order. So I'm going to start with you, Nancy. Oops, hold on. I've got to unmute you. Sorry.
In light of all of this, I am very eager to pull together a collaborative problem-solving group that will get working on specific plans to reverse enrollment decline, because I think the sooner we do that, the better. So I'm excited. I hope we can get working on that lickety-toot.
Thank you. Okay, Sally. Oh, sorry. I think I have to do the unmuting and I keep not doing that. Hang on one sec. Unmute.
I did it now.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. I love the energy of this meeting. I feel like a lot of good things have come about, and I really appreciate, Krista, your leadership. You had great things in mind for us to work on tonight, and it was just right on what we needed to talk about. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks. Mary.
All set. It's all great. Pass.
Okay. Andrew.
Yeah, so I like Sarah's idea that just hearing from Patrick, like we hear from the governor, would be really useful to sort of keep ahead of things that I see swirl on Front Porch Forum. Just, you know, sometimes people start filling in the blanks, and I think it'd be great to hear from Patrick. And I'm also hoping that we can see Patrick in that MAUSD face mask, branded face mask.
Nice. Okay, you're up, Patrick.
I just continue to be appreciative in the way our community rises to the challenge, and I think tonight's meeting was another piece of evidence of our community rising to the challenge. So I'm excited about the potential of this group of 5 town leaders coming together. I'm excited about what this sort of video series could be. In terms of responding to wonderings that people have and getting ahead of people filling in the blank, as Andrew said. I think that's really well put. That absolutely happens. So we just continue to evolve and roll with this and find creative and innovative ways to communicate and problem solve together. And it's a wonderful thing. I don't know that this is happening everywhere, and I'm glad it's happening here.
Okay, Rob.
Good. Yeah, I love the idea of Patrick having a share out. And I think we really need to value the space for the entire community to ask questions. And I understand you might not have the answers, Patrick, but also it's a great opportunity to engage the educators, paraprofessionals, other folks in the school district to maybe reach out and try to answer those questions for people if they don't have that opportunity. You know, let those folks that are in the weeds operate in the weeds. Just another great touch point for our teachers and our students. And yeah, I think gratitude to you, Patrick, and the entire team. It's been an incredible thing that you guys have done. It's been unknown and feels like a year upon year of unknowns. And I would encourage us to continue to build upon those knowns and even increase with video chat, fireside chat with Patrick, moving forward. And I would say the same for the Community Engagement Committee and also the Feasibility Study Committee. I think the more transparent and honest we can be, whether that's with an answer or a non-answer, is so important moving forward in the world that we now live in.
Thank you. Kevin?
I don't believe I have anything. I just like to sit here and listen.
Okay. Let's see. Kim, trying to unmute you here. There you go. Oh, there you go.
There I am. Okay, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all the work that Patrick and the district are doing, and then this entire group who's just devoted to making a real difference in our community. And a lot of people in this group don't have kids in the district, don't have students, but have a very deep and intense interest in making sure that our district can be the best that it can be, and the willingness to devote your time and energy to that is very inspiring. So thank you to everybody.
Okay, Christopher.
Thanks. I just have kind of more of the same. That was my same message. But as a community member, it is clear to me that you have a very difficult and fairly thankless job sometimes. And you all bring a lot of energy and dedication. And I've been really impressed with the efficiency and just veracity with which you bring the best to our community. So we really appreciate that. Thank you all.
Thank you. And Darla. Trying to unmute still. Oh, there you go.
I, again, just like gratitude, like I said before, having to pivot the way that you have, that the school has, creating those opportunities for kids to continue their learning, to have lunch delivered by Elsa and the crew. I mean, those pieces really make it a difficult situation for kids so great. And I'm so appreciative of that. Having a group like this that really binds different sectors of the community together. I haven't had kids at Mount Abe for, I'm going to say how many years it's been. Over 10, 15, almost 15 years. It's great to be able to still be connected in that way. And I look forward to bringing select board and, other community leaders together in that. And I'm happy to be part of how that gets organized. That's a great conversation to have.
Okay. Thank you, Darla. Dawn, I don't know if you have anything to add. I'm trying to unmute you. I cannot. Are you there, Dawn?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to catch the minutes, so I'm going to pass, but I am appreciative of everything. I'm just going to keep typing.
And I'm going to say thank you for typing. Okay, Liz, you're there. You've been quiet, but we're so glad you're with us. I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
Thanks again, everybody, and stay well. All of that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Liz. Okay, so I think that, oh my gosh, 8:59. Nice work, everyone. So could I get a motion from either Andrew or Rob to adjourn the meeting? And we'll meet again. Oh, sorry, hold on. Public comment. If there's any other, I'm assuming there's not. Okay, so we'll adjourn and then see you guys again in 2 weeks. So Andrew has moved to adjourn, and Rob, I'm assuming you'll second for us?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thanks, Krista.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.